Welcome to the Business of Medicine podcast from the Southern Medical Association. Since 1906, SMA has had a singular mission: to provide medical professionals with the resources they need to learn from each other, and in doing so, improve the overall quality of patient care. The Business of Medicine podcast is dedicated to exploring and simplifying the varied and complex business aspects of running a medical practice so that you can do what you do best: provide your patients with the highest possible standard of care. To learn more about SMA's many other services and educational initiatives, please visit us at sma.org.
Thank you all for coming back for another episode of the Business of Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Stevenson, and today we are joined with Gregg Brooks, Principal of Worldwide Benefit Services, LLC. And in this episode, we're going to be discussing IDTheft Assist. IDTheft Assist is a monthly subscription that gives you and your immediate family access to the quickest identity theft response services. IDTheft Assist has advocates who will do all the work for you so you can get back to your daily routine. Thank you for being here with us today, Gregg.
Well, it's my pleasure, Dylan. Thanks for having me.
So, Gregg, let's just start off. Why don't you give a little bit background about yourself, what IDTheft Assist is, and how it works?
Okay, great. I guess I'll start with I reside in Louisville, Kentucky, and graduated in 1980 from the University of Kentucky and immediately went into the insurance business. And I'm celebrating about my 41st year now in the insurance industry, which is means nothing other than I'm a little long in the tooth, I guess. But my career really started, I was a corporate guy with a company called Fraudulent Life and Accident. And after about 10 years left, formed my own agency, primarily in the benefits space. And in the mid 90s, my career really morphed into product design work, where I started creating and designing niche products that I would wholesale to insurance carriers, associations, affinity groups, large employer groups, either as a value add to an existing core product or as a way to generate non-traditional revenue. And in the early 2000 timeframe, there was a huge media push on this whole concept of identity theft being the fastest growing white collar crime in America, which struck me as rather interesting. So I just started doing a little research. And after some research, it was abundantly clear to me that the issue that people faced when they were in fact compromised was not so much the financial exposure, but the time, knowledge, and or the credentials to clean it up. And it was extremely time consuming, and people were just wringing their hands, not knowing what to do. Consequently, I embarked upon a journey to create an identity theft restoration platform. And in fact, that's what I did. And in 2003, we were first to market with an identity theft restoration product. And today, we're the largest provider of identity theft restoration services in the world, servicing well over 20 million people under that platform. So that's sort of the genesis of IDTheft Assist. And we work in a variety of different markets, ranging from, of course, as I mentioned, with associations, affinity groups, insurance carriers, large employer groups, et cetera. And as of late, been doing some work in the social media arena with influencers and that sort of thing, which has been very eye-opening and interesting as well. IDTheft Assist, as you mentioned in your intro, it is a service product. There's really three legs to that stool of identity theft. There's a restoration component, there is a monitoring piece, and then a back-end insurance product. And the way they work together, the restoration is clearly the most important part of the program, which is really where the rubber meets the road. When someone has an identity theft or suspicion thereof, they would have the ability to pick up the phone, dial an 800 number, reach our service center, where we have staff with fraud resolution specialists, attorneys, CPAs, enrolled IRS agents, qualified, credentialed people that will actually clean up the mess for you. That's a huge, huge value. The second piece of the puzzle is the monitoring service, where we will monitor your credit activity at the credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, and we'll notify you if there's a change in those. We also do what we call identity monitor, and monitor the dark web for any activity that may indicate that your personal identifying information may be on the dark web, and notify you of that. And lastly, a back-end insurance piece, which would reimburse you for any expenses that you incurred in the event you tried to do the job on your own. So that being said, that's from 30,000 feet, the genesis of the program and a little bit about the components of the program.
Man, where were you back in the early 2000s for my family? My mother, poor woman, she has had her identity stolen twice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Back when I was younger, someone stole her identity and bought like thousands of dollars worth of stamps. I was like, well, if you're at least gonna do something, buy something decent except stamps. I mean, come on now. But yeah, she's had her bad luck with identity theft. So
it's not, Dylan, it's really not unusual when you say that. Thanks for sharing that. But what's amazing is, having done this now for 18 years, very rarely do I have a conversation with anyone that personally has not experienced an identity compromise, or someone very close to them has experienced it. And they tell these horrible stories of the hassle and the time and, months and years to try to clean these messes up. And that's exactly what we do. That's what we're for. So.
Yeah, thankfully, I don't think it was too, I know it took months to, sort out and stuff. I don't think it was too terrible for her to get everything sorted out, everything like that. I know she's lucky on her side, as, you see every day, people having worse stories than that, and it taking them years and years and years to get stuff finalized. So totally understand that. So with ID Theft Assist, what sets y'all apart from other ID recovery programs like LifeLock?
Okay, that's a great question, and one I get asked pretty much every time I talk about identity theft. Well, as I indicated a few minutes ago, the key to these programs is the restoration piece. The monitoring services, everybody buys them from the same place, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, and the dark web's, monitoring and whatnot. And those things are great tools. They're great ways to be vigilant about what's going on with your stuff. And if there's a change in your credit, or if your information appears on the dark web, we'll certainly notify you. Okay. Now, there's no way that we can determine that the activity is in fact fraudulent. Okay. Nobody can do that. What we can tell you is that there's somebody has requested a credit report on you, and we'll notify you. And then you'll go to your personal dashboard, which you have as a part of this program, and you'll look and you'll click in and look at the alert. It'll say that it was GMC credit, requested a credit report. And actually, 2 weeks earlier, you had bought a new car and financed it through GMC, and that's why they requested it. So it's not actually fraudulent. So we would tell you that there's a change, but we couldn't tell you that there was anything that it was fraudulent, in fact. So that's pretty much across the board. Everybody that plays in the space has that monitoring feature, and most have a back-end insurance piece, okay? Where the rubber meets the road, as I indicated previously, is in the restoration space. And we actually do what we will call full restoration, which means that we actually do the work for you. Most of the players in the space do what we would call assisted restoration. And how that would work is, with most of the people in the space, you would have what you suspect is an identity theft or suspicion thereof, and you'd pick up the phone, you dial an 800 number, and you'd reach a call center. And someone, you would identify yourself and suggest that you had had a problem, and they'd say, well, tell us a little bit about it. And they say, Dylan, don't worry, we'll help you with this. Here's, Dylan, what you need to do in order to clean this up. You need to email these people, you need to call these people, you need to write a letter to this creditor. So they'll give you instructions on what you need to do. So you're saddled with the responsibility of doing much of the legwork yourself. Contrasting that with what we do, we say, Dylan, sorry to hear what happened. Don't worry, we're going to help you with this. Now tell me what's going on. Okay, I understand. And now what we're going to do, Dylan, is we're going to send you a limited power of attorney. We're going to email it to you. You're going to print it off. You're going to sign it. You're going to either fax it back or scan it and email it to us. And now we're going to go to work on your behalf. And we're going to do all that legwork for you. You can go back to work and do what you normally do. You don't get interrupted. You don't have to spend all that time like your mother did, making phone calls and talking to people and get passed around on voicemails and waiting for people to call you back and whatnot. We actually do all that on your behalf. That's a huge difference. And with the people that we have on our platform, ranging from attorneys to CPAs to fraud resolution specialists and enrolled IRS agents, when there's things like IRS fraud or stimulus check fraud, and we have to talk to the IRS, we can do that on your behalf because we have credentialed people that are able to talk to those kinds of organizations on your behalf. So we do that work. You get on with your life and you don't have to worry about doing any of that yourself. So that is a huge difference in what we do. You may remember back in the LifeLock. Look, I'm grateful for LifeLock every day. They're a good company. They've been recently purchased. They're owned by Symantec, I believe, and that which is a publicly traded entity. And they launched a little bit after we did. And you may even remember their ads. Their CEO would get on there and on their advertisements, whether it was TV or radio or on the side of a bus or billboard, and say, look, if you have our service, you won't get compromised. I'm so confident of that. Here's my social security number. And he put his social security number out there. Well, that didn't turn out so well for him. He had numerous compromises, and actually LifeLock experienced some problems in the fact that they had promised some things that they couldn't deliver. So you'll notice that their message today is that we can't prevent all identity theft. No one can, but if you have one, we're there to help you. So again, the message is the restoration is the key component. They do a lot of advertising and certainly bring a lot of awareness to the problem. We're absolutely convinced that our solution is absolutely paramount in the space with our supreme restoration component, and that we don't just use a call center mentality. So that would be the significant difference between what we offer and our competitors.
Yeah, and I totally understand that. I think the one thing I think people just get so confused about is, there truly is no way you can really protect your identity in 2021. Like I have my grandmother, she's probably close to 80 now, and she's about a couple of years ago, she finally got into the world of technology.
Right.
She, got an iPhone, iPad, starting to really get into things. And she'll call. There was one time she did something, and I was just like, please call me anytime you have questions about stuff. Because it was like, Apple called me for this, and this. And I was like, first off, Apple will never call you.
Right.
They will send you an email or do anything besides call you. So it's just to the point of, I told her, please just call me before anything happens, because she gave some information. I was like, oh, Lord. Thankfully, nothing's happened to her or happened to her information or anything like that. But I was just like, she's just like, I thought I should trust him. I'm like, well, that's where this kind of problem happens all the time, is you feel like you have to trust people because they say they're from Apple, Amazon, these trustworthy companies, and you don't realize that they won't do that kind of stuff. They won't call you or anything like that.
Yeah, the IRS, Social Security, Apple, whatnot, they do not call you on the telephone. They don't send you text messages. They send you a letter.
Mm-hmm.
And you gave her great advice. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, I feel like the older generation, they're having to conform to technology and things like that, and they don't really know better because they just don't know. And that's what I tell her. I'm like, just call me, please. Just don't do it, because it's just I just don't want her, all the stuff she's worked hard for go down the drain because some horrible person decided to take advantage of an older lady.
Yeah,
So,
well, to that end, Dylan, what we've found very interesting, we do when somebody uses the service, we do lots of, ask lots of questions, and we'll do a survey and so forth, and ask them lots of questions and determine, was it a stressful experience, and how did we do, and so forth and so on. And we get a lot of information from those follow-up questions. And the one thing that we're finding is that the millennial population is really bad about giving information to telephonic hackers, if you will, or telephonic scammers. And look, it doesn't take one long to recognize that if you walk through an airport, how important your device is to most people. Okay, you've obviously bumped into somebody that's texting or looking at their phone or their tablet or whatever, and everybody's got their heads, right in that phone or that tablet. And as a matter of fact, I have 3 adult children, and they are in that millennial range, and I will call them on the telephone, and they won't answer, and instantaneously I'll get a text back, "What's up?" And I'm like, I want to talk to you. Can't you answer your phone? Do we have to communicate via text? And that's just the way they do it. So when they do answer the phone and they engage with somebody, we have found that they are more likely to give information that they shouldn't give to a scammer than someone like you or me. So that being said, it's not only Granny on Facebook, but it's that 24-year-old that's used to texting everybody, and then actually picks up the phone, doesn't realize it's a scammer, and gives them information. So we see a lot of that. It's a lot more than I suspected we would, actually.
That's very interesting. Like, I know Apple's really good about it now. Like, if I don't have the number in my phone, I don't answer it. That's just personally, I grew up that way. Like, if I didn't know the number, I ain't answering it.
Yeah.
Apple's really good about spam and anything like that. Like, if you really need me, you're going to leave a voicemail, and then you can obviously tell when one's a robot sitting there, or if it's a real person talking to you or anything like that.
Yes.
So that's very interesting that you say that. I feel like the millennials and everything growing up in the world of technology would know better than to do that. So I found that very interesting that you just said that.
Yeah, it was surprising to me as well. But
so in preparing for this podcast, I was looking on your website, and I found a very interesting statistic about how someone is a victim once every 2 seconds. That just kind of seems shocking, but not shocking in the same way. How true is that in today's time in 2021?
Actually, it's probably even more often than that. Since those statistics probably are a few years old now. And what I will tell you is the incidence of identity theft over the last 15 months or so since the pandemic started have gone up significantly. With people losing jobs, losing their insurance, filing for unemployment. I mean, unemployment fraud is unbelievable. We spend the majority of our time in our service center today working on unemployment identity theft, where actually somebody will get your information and file a fraudulent unemployment claim. It's truly unbelievable. So it is absolutely everywhere. There's all sorts of ways that these scammers get your information and utilize it to either get a job, file a claim with unemployment, file for a tax return using your information, get medical care using your information, et cetera. I mean, it's unbelievable. So that's a very valid statistic, and one that is on the rise. It's not declining. I mean, these people are super, super capable, super smart, and they seem to be one step ahead always. So we're seeing all sorts of new ways that people are compromising people's identity.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. I figured it's probably like half a second, millisecond, whatever it is in today's time, because people are creative these days on trying to get people's identity, scam them, do whatever they need to do besides actually working a job and making a living.
Oh yeah. We've seen some pretty creative identity thefts over the years.
So speaking of that, like what kind of creative ways are you talking about?
Well, I'll give you one that's I've heard a time or two. Somebody got an individual's, if you get somebody's social security number, date of birth, name and address, you can march right over to the motor vehicle department and get a driver's license using your picture and someone else's information. Then you can march right over to your local apartment complex and rent an apartment using that license, okay, their credit, so forth and so on, your picture. You rent it, you pay your first month's rent and the deposit. And after about 3 months, when you have not paid your rent after numerous notifications and whatnot, knock down the door and we find the remnants of a meth lab. And interestingly enough, who do they come after? Well, they're going to come after you because you're in for your name, your address, your social security number, your date of birth. And so they'll knock on your door, and they knock on your door and arrest you. And there you are. Good news is we have a significant network of criminal and civil attorneys that we work with and are able to, get people out of jail in the middle of the night and all those kinds of things if we need to. Now, those are not happening every day, but that's quite an unusual situation. But what you see here, it really isn't anything financial specifically. It is just somebody using your information to commit a crime, and you're the one that's liable for the crime because they have your information, not the actual criminal. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it makes me think that when you said that about the DMV and stuff like that, I guess I imagine you've seen the movie Identity Theft with Melissa McCarthy.
Yes.
Have you ever seen that? I know it's not a funny subject that it's about, but that movie just cracks me up because you have this woman, Melissa McCarthy plays, going and she steals the identities, buying jet skis, house, anything you can think of under Jason Bateman's character's name. And I'll tell you something funny. There's a part in the movie where she throat punches him. Mm-hmm. And I mean, me and my family have a joke about that, about if we ever meet someone we just don't really like, we're going to throat punch them like Melissa McCarthy did in that movie, because it just cracks me up the entire time. Again, I know it's a serious subject, but it's just, they make light of the situation and just hilarious.
No, funny movie. Both those people are quite entertaining, of course, but it's that stuff happens all the time. I can't even begin to tell you the number of stories. And I talk to people all day long about identity theft, and whether it's, a prospect considering doing it for their company or an association wanting to offer it to their membership or what have you, or an insurance company wanting to add value to a core product that they're marketing to differentiate that product from a competitor in open market, and you'll hear all sorts of crazy stories, but it's not unusual for someone to have experienced someone using their credit card, their debit card, their checking account without their authorization. Still, the most common type of identity theft that we see is that kind of stuff. The credit card companies are pretty good today, and I'm sure you've probably had a call or two when they have an algorithm that determines what's Dylan's spending pattern, okay? And all of a sudden, there's this random charge in Seattle, Washington, and that's just not in your grid, okay? And so you might get a phone call from Amex or Visa or MasterCard, and they'll ask you if that's your charge, and you'll tell them no, and then they'll cancel your card and issue a new card for you. But they're pretty good about doing that. But still, this happens all the time. I mean, these scammers put devices on gas pumps, on ATM machines, and get your credit card information, and they'll sell it to someone in the Midwest for $50, and that person will sell it to somebody on the West Coast for $50. And the next thing you know is you'll see this, there'll be this very small charge that'll show up, maybe at a Walmart or a gas station or something like that. And if it goes through undetected, okay, then very shortly thereafter, there'll be a bigger charge. And that's usually what happens. So it still happens. That sort of basic identity theft and compromise happens every single day. And we certainly have the ability to help you with that and cancel cards and get you new cards and all that kind of thing. So we work on those things all the time.
That's awesome to hear. So I know you've spoken about stories, and we know people who've had horror stories. Do you have any like success stories or anything from IDTheft Assist you'd like to share?
Well, sure. What I can tell you is our team is so qualified and so credentialed that the list of testimonials that we get is just completely amazing. Not a day goes by where somebody doesn't send an email or there's a message about somebody in the service center doing an incredible job, and things like, we feel like they're part of our family now. They took our situation as if it was their own. And we hear all those things. And we actually do not have a limit on the amount of time, money, or energy that we'll spend on cleaning this up. Many of our competitors have a limit as to what they'll do. $1 million or what have you. We don't limit this. We work until the deal is cleaned up, until the compromise or the identity theft is cleaned up. And that's another huge differentiator between what we do and our competition. We work until it is cleaned up and repaired. And what, I'll tell you another thing about that is, 7-8 years ago, and you'd have what you would consider a fraudulent charge on a credit card or something like that, and you'd call the credit card company and you say, this wasn't me, they'd reverse it real quick. Wasn't a big deal. Today, not so much, because what we're seeing is people saying things are fraudulent when they're really not, because of financial challenges or what have you. So the onus is really put on the consumer to prove that this is not their charge. So there's a lot more time that's required on the part of the consumer. So that's where we jump in and help out. So we alleviate all those time restraints that are placed on people, to prove that in fact the identity theft is real and it's not them. So we see that all the time, and that's a huge challenge for people. And the fact that we do the work for you, you can go back to your daily life and we'll clean it up. Not unusual for a cleanup job to take months. That's not unusual. And you can imagine, without the credentials and without the knowledge of knowing who to call and who to talk to in a particular organization and that sort of thing, with the number of people that we service and the number of times that we've had to do this, we have a good working knowledge of these organizations and how to get through the red tape and get it done. Where a normal person, it's going to take them twice as long or 3 times as long to do this. And we do it, and you get back to your daily life, your daily routine. You don't miss a beat.
Awesome. I like that. So since we're winding down in the podcast, I do have just a couple more questions. So we know in 2021, and you've said it, I've said it, there's no foolproof way to protect yourself from identity theft. But what are some good practices that you have picked up on ways that people could possibly prevent it happening to them?
Well, first and foremost, although it's not a prevention tool necessarily, it's a very vigilant way, if you will, of taking care of or of protecting yourself, is subscribing to an identity theft service, number one. And those services have credit monitoring and dark web monitoring and that sort of thing. So monitoring your credit activity is very, very important. So making sure you take a peek at your credit reports on a regular basis to make sure that there's nothing on there that's fraudulent. That's certainly one of the first things and one of the most important things to make sure you do. Our service provides that to you. And when you subscribe to the service, you set yourself up for what we would call credit monitoring. And you'll have a little personalized dashboard where you can go in at any time and look at your credit report, your credit score, and that sort of thing. So if there's a big change in your credit score and you don't understand it, or there's some things on your credit report that shouldn't be there, those are the time, that's when you pick up the phone and give us a call. So keeping your eye on that. Our service also provides what we call alerts. So if there is a change, we will notify you. Okay, and let you know that there's a change so you can go in and look and see what's going on. Another thing that we do that's awfully cool is that once a month, if there's been no change or no activity in your credit report, we will send you what we call an all clear notification, letting you know that we've been 24/7 monitoring your credit activity and there's been no change in your credit report or score in the last 30 days, which is just a touch point letting you know we're watching out for you. So that's one thing that you want to do. Please look at your credit card statements, look at your debit card, look at your checking account, balance your checkbook, make sure that you keep your eye on the transactions that come through your banking relationships. Look at those often. Shredding documents that have personal identifying information like social security numbers and dates of birth and that sort of thing on them, very, very important. Don't just, tear up your credit card statements and throw them in the trash. Not good practice. So shredding documents is very, very important. Changing passwords regularly on your computer and your phone and any of those things that you do, any streaming services and things like that you use, changing your password on a regular basis is a good practice to get into. And don't use things like your initials or your address or your date of birth in those passwords. Try to mix it up with capital letters and small letters and numerals and symbols and things like that. Things that would be virtually impossible to figure out. So those are some very basic things. A lot of them make just abundant sense, right? But most people don't do those things. So getting in a habit and practice of doing those things is very, very valuable and important.
Yeah, let me tell you. So I used to be tear my statements up and throw them in the trash, blah, blah, blah. Because, that's what I grew up seeing parents do, all that stuff. And then it was like 2 years ago, I was like, you know what? For Christmas this year, Mom, get me a shredder. And so I start shredding everything these days. I don't know what I do, why I haven't had a shredder sooner in life than I haven't, because it is awesome to have, because I have to shred, credit card statements, anything like that. And I know it's safe from being picked back up, or safer from being picked back up, whatever. So shredding is just amazing in general.
It's a great practice to get in. Another thing is, we all go to the gas station and put in our debit card or our credit card and put it in the machine and pump gas. If you really want to be super, super proactive, is stay away from ATM machines, those kinds of things. People are concerned about, online purchasing and things like that. That's not where, people are getting your information, not nearly as much as what we're seeing with, the ATM machines, the gas pumps and things like that. And, at restaurants, you can buy a little device at, Office Depot or whatever, where you can swipe at someone's credit card and it'll download the information. And, we see that happens all the time. You go to a restaurant, you pay with your card, somebody goes in the back room, they swipe that thing, they go home that night, get online on the dark web, they'll sell that information to somebody for $50 and, way to make a little additional cash. So cash is a good way to transact if you can avoid using a machine that swipes or what have you, if you have the capacity to do that. Online shopping is, and we have determined is probably safer than using the machines.
Well, I'll throw this back out at you with that, or counter to you. So, especially with how COVID went and the way the world is going, in 2021 and future on, where cash is, non-existent these days. I mean, I still use cash for certain things, but like, for instance, I work part-time with a minor league baseball team in Alabama, and the whole field, because they initially opened up during COVID, but of course the season got canceled and things like that. So the next year they've opened, which is this year, and they are completely cashless.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just where we're going these days.
Yeah.
Is where the dollar just isn't worth the paper dollars and what it used to be.
You're 100%. I experienced the same thing. My son called me a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hey, Dad, there's a professional soccer team here in Louisville." And he said, "I got tickets to the game. You want to go?" I said, "Sure." So we went to the game and went down to get something, a snack or whatever. And so we ordered what we wanted, and I pulled out my wallet and I handed them cash, and they said, "No, we only take card." And I said, "Oh, really?" He said, and then he was quick to point out, he said, "That's not just our stand here. It's the entire stadium. No cash, only credit cards or debit cards." And I thought, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? And I would have never known that. I'm sure there's people that go in there with cash only, no cards, whatever. I'd say that number is small, but expecting to get something and not able to use cash. So I think you're right. It is going that direction. So even more of a reason to make sure you monitor the transactions that come through on your statement. And with all of us doing online banking, most of us anyway these days, you can check in real time, activity on your account. And another thing, most people have the capacity with their online banking to get a notification when their card's used. And you'll get dinged and be aware of that. I encourage you to use that.
Yeah, I have that on one of my cards as well. Like, as soon as I use it, I get a notification on my phone. Doing that. And the interesting story before we get to the final question, this was years ago. This is back when all I had was a debit card and I had no credit yet or anything like that. And I'd stop to get gas. I'd just come back from Six Flags and stopped and got gas, and then went on home. Well, between that gas station and home, I lost my debit card, or thought I lost my debit card. Come find out years later, it just slid into an unknown compartment in my car that I couldn't get to without a screwdriver. But so I went to the bank the next day. I was like, "Hey, I lost my debit card. I need to freeze it, get my account frozen until I get my new one, blah, blah, blah." And they were like, "Okay, great." So they started doing the stuff, and she come back and was like, "Have you been to Turkey lately?" And I was like, "Never left the country." "No, why?" She said, "Well, you just had a charge this morning in Turkey, in Istanbul." And I was like, "Oh, wow." And this was back before I really started checking things, weekly or daily, whatever, how I feel that day. And I was just like, well, I'm glad, things were looking up, and I lost my debit card, and it came in because I wouldn't have known that. And, they do what's called test purchases at first, to see what they can get through. And then if they get it through, then they can, do the big purchases later. And thankfully it had already been it was only like a $10 charge, and it could have been a lot worse. But thankfully I had went into the bank that day and they were like, "Yeah, we're going to have to do some work on your account." And I was like, "Go for it." And so, got everything changed around and things like that. So I'm good today, but it was just a interesting side story that I just thought of.
Well, I mean, there's an example right there. You would have never known, probably. They might have, I'm sure they would have probably contacted you, but isn't it interesting that you went in there and at the same time you had that situation, so they were able to prevent that, not allow that charge and take care of it for you. So that's some good luck there, Dylan.
Yeah, and it was just a good catch on the bank teller's part that day, because I was like, "Hey, I lost this like 12 hours ago. Can you just verify, there haven't been any purchases or anything like that?" And that people in Turkey had literally done it within the past like 5 hours. So thankfully, she caught it and we were able to turn it around before it got any worse than it did. So.
Yeah, the credit card companies and the debit card companies are pretty good today about questioning international charges. I don't know if you've ever tried to buy anything overseas, but you'll get notification in most cases with most banks that there's a charge. Is this your charge? So they will allow it to go through. Their systems are typically set up that they will put a hold on international charges until they approve it with you. So they're doing a better job of that kind of thing, which is good.
Well, and funny story with that, I have friends who, they as soon as they leave the state or, something's off than what their normally purchase patterns are, the bank will call them and be like, hey, is this you, blah, blah, blah. And I have the same bank as them. And I have gone all over the US at times. Don't get a call at all. It's so funny.
Isn't that interesting?
It's so interesting. Like I went to Hawaii a couple of weeks ago and never got a call because I made charges on my credit card and had to use my debit card one time and never got a call. I guess they just trustworthy, or just seeing what happened. So
well, that's interesting.
Very, and and they're really good about that kind of stuff too. So I was just like, well, why won't y'all call me? Like, I know I'm trustworthy too. So we're just gonna get to our last question, Greg, to finish up this podcast. And IDTheft Assist is like we said, is a subscription. And with SMA membership, you get a subscription to the IDTheft Assist program at a discounted rate. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, significant discount. You can go to IDTheftAssist.com and see the public rate for that. Mm-hmm. And then you all are getting about a 30% discount.
All right, people, you heard it. You need to go to, if you want to get some more information about it, you can go to sma.org/ID-theft. And I'll put the link on the podcast page as well for people if you want to get some more information about it and learn more about how you can protect yourself and your family at the same time. So Greg, thank you again for being here with us today. I really appreciate it. You have really delved deep into the world of identity theft, and hopefully someone can hear this podcast and benefit from it. And people who have had their identity theft stolen and they need help with it, they can go to you. And I just really appreciate your time.
Oh, Dylan, thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed The Business of Medicine. For more episodes in this series or SMA's The Practice of Medicine podcast, go to sma.org/podcast or subscribe to us on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about SMA's mission, please visit sma.org. And thank you for joining us.